Hello, my name's Aston, and we're back. This time, sadly, we're not continuing with the principles course because that one finished. So we're doing microeconomics. I didn't finish everything about principles, but I want to do as much as I can for micro. And we started off with a new chapter, and it's called consumer behavior. So now, consumer behavior is basically the allocation of your limited income to across goods and services that maximize your own well-being. So this is in the case of customers or consumers. So consumers, they have limited income. You go to work, you make, let's just say, $500. Now, how do we allocate those $500 across goods and services that maximize your well-being? Remember, you're a consumer. A consumer always wants to maximize their own well-being. Why would I buy a shoe that costs $40 when there's a shoe that's $30 for the same exact quality? It doesn't make sense. So this is the question. What determines demand? I think we already learned about demand in microeconomics, the determinants of demand. But now this, in micro, we ask what determines the demand. And that's where we have the 3 steps for consumer behavior. The first one is consumer preferences. Essentially, it's a ranking. Consumers, they can rank these goods. They're basically saying, you know what? I prefer to buy, let's just say, woolen jackets over cotton jackets. Or maybe you prefer to buy one shoe over another. So you understand your preferences. And now the next one is budget constraints. You have a limited income, which also, with limited income, that means you can't just buy the most expensive shoe on the market, but you have to buy something within your budget. That creates a scarcity for you. Because of your limited income, you have to actually think, how do I want to spend my limited income to maximize my own benefits? And the next one is consumer choices. Listen, because customers choose, products based on their preferences, based on their income, and based on the prices of those goods. And these 3 determine demand. Now, when you're faced, by the way, whenever I say you, I mean like consumers or customers, whatever. So whenever you're faced with a product, let's just say these 2 almost identical black markers, now you can either prefer one marker over the other, or you can you'll be, sorry, 1 second. Let me redo that real quick. You can either prefer one marker over the other, or you can be indifferent about them. So being indifferent about a product basically means you value them the same and they provide the same level of benefit or utility to you. By the way, utility, well-being, and what else? What was there? One more. Utility and well-being. They're basically like interchangeable. You can just talk about them however. So prefer or indifferent about whatever kind of product. So now we talk about market baskets and bundles. So essentially, a market basket / a bundle is a specific combination of goods and services. Yeah, that's literally it. It's a specific combination of goods and services, and it gives you the exact quantity of those goods and services. That could be food, that could be clothing, and that could be phones. That could be, if it's like that, that could be food. That could be even maybe rent and housing. So, in economics at least, the units don't really matter. It's all about consistency, because we have different ways of measuring. Like, for example, you can either measure, let's just say, fruits based on kg, or you can do it based on head, or you can do it based on head, or you can also, if you're buying, let's just say, one drink to another, you can compare it based on the size, or as in the milliliters, or you can compare it based on how much you get, or something like that. So in economics, we don't really care about the units, we just care about the consistency, because we want to provide structure. It's all about these preferences, and if we had to take into account every single one of these things, then it would be too hard for us humans to do. Now, of course, like I said, at least in neoclassical economics, we assume that consumers act irrationally. Like I just said, you use your income to maximize your own utility, your own benefit. right? That's basically what customers will do. But of course, in behavioral economics, at least, it's like a study of economics that shows you how consumers actually react, actually behave, right? So there are times when consumers act irrational. For example, peer pressure, trends. You could also buy it based on impulses, addiction, and of course, there's one more, debt. Now, I remember we talked about limited income, but sometimes you can actually take an overdraft or, borrow money from friends, right? And that can actually cause you to go into debt. So you actually overconsume something. That's also possible. So now, these over here for whatever the demand determinants, it's the steps for consumer behavior. But now, this is the assumptions we have for customer preferences. Now, the first one is completeness. You might think, okay, what does completeness mean? So, completeness is actually the ability to compare different products. It's not transparency, it's completeness. So, basically, you're able to, I know I can compare an apple's benefit to a banana's benefit. I can compare, let's just say, one protein shake's benefit to another protein shake benefit. You feel me? So you know the value of these goods. You know how much utility each good provides already. Now, the next one is transitivity. I can't pronounce that properly. Transitivity. So basically, it means that consumers' preferences are well defined, so you know which one you like more than the other, and they're also consistent. This is really important, by the way, to economics. So, for example, if you prefer A over B and you prefer B over C, therefore you'll prefer A over C. It's just logical. And the next one is the more is better. We assume both goods are desirable. Like I just said, apples and bananas. So that means I like eating apples and I like eating bananas. Okay? So here's the thing. We can actually put this onto an indifference curve. This is what it's called. This little cool curve over here, see us sloping downward, that convex from the origin, that is called an indifference curve. So now, essentially, what it says is it shows you all the possible combinations between two goods. In this case, it's x and y, and it shows you the different combinations of two goods that provide the same level of utility. That's what the line represents. The line represents the same level of utility. So if I was consuming at A, I would still be having the same level of utility as if I was consuming at B. So, of course, you see the two different points. You see also C. C is just inefficient because why are you here when you can be on the line? The line is where you want to be at because it provides. So you're basically consuming less of Y, less of X, and lower utility when you could be providing on A or B. If you want to compare A and B, that's not possible, sadly. You can see that, oh, hey, A has more Y, B has more X, but if they provide the same level of utility, the consumer doesn't really care because, like, hey, if I'm getting the same level of benefit, it doesn't matter if I get more Y than X, right? Same thing. So, let's just take a step back real quick. So we learned about the assumptions, and now you might be thinking, okay, well, that doesn't explain why people act certain ways, right? But it's not supposed to. That's not the reason why we assume these three things. In economics, it's all about structure. We want to plot graphs and we want to see the real world impact. So we want to analyze the variance. And that's, of course, where behavioral economics comes in because this is just all theory. So essentially what happens is the reason why we assume these three things is because it makes consumers consistent and it makes it easy to graph into a curve like this. So it's consistent and rational. Now, even when you buy random things, like for example, I'm on a diet and today I'm going to buy a Snickers bar, right? Economists still think that's rational. I'm still maximizing my own utility because, hey, while I'm on a diet, I also want to maximize my own well-being, so I'm eating a Snickers bar. By the way, this is true. It was like Halloween yesterday, so I'm really hungry and I want to buy a Snickers bar. So, The reason why it's actually sloping downwards like this is because of the two assumptions I mentioned. More is better, and because, well, it's opportunity cost. So essentially, both y and x are desirable. Now you would like to have more y and more x. Obviously, like if I could have more apples and more bananas, I would. I would always, if it provides same level of utility, I would do that, right? So the reason why it actually slopes is because yes, you prefer both the goods, but you also need to understand that there's opportunity cost between consuming these goods. So if I get more X, that means that I'll probably get less Y, because remember, we have limited income. So by the way, the limited income is in the next few videos I'm going to make called the budget line. This is the indifference curve only measures your utility. It doesn't take into account the money. And I'll make a whole video about indifference curves later because this is a little bit confusing. So when you move, let's just say from A to B, it shows you the difference in choices while keeping your utility constant. Yes, I'm getting more Y at A, and yes, I'm getting more X at B, but I'm still keeping the same level of utility. So as long as I'm on the line, it's fine. Okay, I explained C to you and A and B. Now what about D? D actually lies on a different indifference curve. It'll probably look something like this. Because on our indifference curve, we have the same level of utility. But over there, we're getting more Y for the same level of X and at high utility. Meaning, that's not possible. There has to be a different curve. Even C. C is probably on a different indifference curve. Like that. So, when you plot all these different curves like this, like this, like this, that is an indifference map. An indifference map is basically a graph that consists of different indifference curves or various indifference curves. They cannot intersect because then that would break the transitivity assumption because if you know, and it would also break the more is better assumption because of course if you prefer one to another and you know your rankings are logical, then it's just not possible for them to intersect. So there is an indifference curve for every level of utility, which is where this comes in. Am I missing anything? I think this is more of a shorter video because this is just explaining the indifference curves and why consumers act certain ways. So, yeah, I think that's it for this video. Next video is probably going to be a little bit longer and maybe a little more explanations because it contains the indifference curves and we are going to get on to perfect substitutes, perfect complements. So right now I just want to put the base. This is the base for microeconomics so far. And by the way, if you want to know the difference between micro and macroeconomics, so microeconomics focuses more on the markets, on consumer behavior. It's a smaller section of the economy, while macro, like in the name, is the whole economy. It's mainly governments because they influence the entire economy and how it's working, on maybe prices, on what happens. So, and of course policies. But there are different kinds of economics. So like I said, behavioral. There's even environmental economics, which really does take into account green GDP. So I'm just saying, economics is pretty broad. It's just like medicine. It's just like any other science would. You have, microbiology. You have, well, there's another kind of like this C kind of biologist. What's his name? A marine biologist. There you go. And it's just specific kinds. Now, obviously, the more specific you get, the more you're gonna get paid. But I will just teach you guys some micro. And I'm gonna go to I need to play Roblox with Ralph Edson very soon. So I'm making this video a little bit shorter than usual. Why am I erasing this now? Okay, bye.